Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay today. Sorry I'm a little bit tired. We're going to finish off now Gary Habermas' PhD, and I'll tell you what I think of his PhD. He then goes on from a dialogue with C.S. Lewis and David Hume. He goes on to say in page 137, but as Pannenberg notes, the narratives record several different appearances which occur under many different circumstances and times, and even includes different participants. So he's noting there that if you're saying that the resurrection took place because it was an illusion or it was a vision, that there were so many different ways and methods of groups and individuals and at different times of these experiences with Jesus, that it doesn't fit any psychological model. He notes that the early formulation, page 156 in 1 Corinthians 15, shows that there was early in the church a proclamation that Jesus had risen from the dead. He notes that the difference between the Jesus and the mythological ideas that were around, is that the vegetation gods, that the Christian faith centers on a historical person, Jesus, and the mythical vegetation gods do not. Pannenberg writes, in 1st century Palestine there are almost no traces whatsoever of any influence from ancient cults of the resurrection gods, page 163. So that's Habermas's PhD. He basically he looks at David Hume, he looks at Pannenberg, and he looks at Kierkegaard, and he looks at an orthodox position, and he engages with them, looking at a lot of present and later scholars on historical Jesus studies. The PhD is well written. It's a little bit biased because he's evangelical, but it really goes into depth and fair exposition of, especially of David Hume and of Pannenberg, and is a good introduction to the historical Jesus studies. An excellent piece of writing. That's Gary Habermas' PhD, and I've linked to that, and we're going to finish off with a few minutes on his minimal fact approach, and I'll give you my opinion as to what he says.
Long arguing the way critics argue from the New Testament to show that Jesus did this, but what is being proclaimed is the best book just came out. You guys know that Craig Keener's books just came off. They were at the ETS, which is why we're here in San Francisco, Evangelical Theological Society, and on the table, Baker Academic Books, a 2-volume set of books on the miracles of Jesus, more than 1,000 pages. Ben Witherington, who's teaching somewhere here tonight, excellent New Testament scholar. Ben calls it the best thing ever written on the miracles of Jesus. And it documents Jesus as a miracle worker. We're not counting the resurrection. We're talking about people he touched and healed, and exorcisms, nature miracles, and so on. And then Craig does a bunch of contemporary miracles, a bunch of contemporary miracle claims, that he just lays the data there and says, you make these decisions. Now, some of you maybe are not Christians, you're skeptics, you hear your Christian friends say miracles are still occurring today. Craig documents a bunch of them, including, and you're going to have to make your own decisions about these things, including resurrections, Lazarus-type resurrections, where people are going to die again, not Jesus-type resurrections. But this is over 1,000 pages long. The guy who's doing it has a PhD from Duke, and he has a minor in classics. When he did his commentary in the Gospel of John, he had 20,000 cross-references to classics. His commentary in Acts, which is coming, his commentary from Acts, I understand it's going to be several thousand pages and 100,000 classical references. So just check this out. 2 volumes, Miracles, Craig Keener, Keener, Baker Books. Okay, I'm just going to stop right there. All I'm making is 2 points. New Testament books are in the right place, right time, closest to the data to be taken seriously as Greco-Roman biography, and that they're much better positioned than almost anything in the ancient world. And secondly, if miracles bother you because they're in the New Testament, look at that data for Jesus being a miracle worker. And here's one odd thing. You know how we think that when legend happens, the story keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger? John is down here at plus 65. John reports less miracles than any other gospel. Critics don't talk about that. When things don't fit their thesis, they quit talking. But why does John have less miracles than Mark does? And Mark's the earliest. Okay, I'm done with some of these reliability deals. I'm going to move now to this minimal facts thing, and I'm going to use the New Testament the way skeptics use the New Testament. And I'm going to argue that if you use data scholars allow, Jesus has been raised from the dead. Now, let me just start with a provocative comment from one of the top historical Jesus scholars around. I believe he called himself a liberal. His name is E.P. Sanders. He recently retired from Duke. He used to teach at Oxford. He's got a couple books out that changed the course of New Testament scholarship, very reputable. He wrote a little book, I believe 1993. It's called The Human Figure of Jesus. And he starts with data scholars know. Data that scholars know about the historical Jesus. And guess what he says when it comes to the aftermath of Jesus' death? He's telling you what scholars believe today, what critics believe. And he says, scholars agree that after his death, Jesus appeared to his early disciples. And then he says this twice in the book, Jesus appeared to his disciples. How he appeared, exactly how he appeared, I'm not prepared to say. But twice he says, my point is, he's not even giving his view. He's telling you what the consensus of scholarship is today.
So, Gary Habermas will go into trying to explain to you that 1 Corinthians 15 passage is early source material, and from that it tells you that the early church believed Jesus died and rose again, and the historical fact is that that's what the disciples believed. Now, whether they were right or wrong, you could debate it, but that's the fact. The fact is, they didn't believe in an imaginary rising of Jesus. It was a real historical death and resurrection. That's the minimal fact approach, using historical data that the critics use. The critics will grant you 1 Corinthians 15. And we've looked at Gary Habermas's PhD, and anybody who says miracles can't happen, Jesus didn't rise from the dead because miracles can't happen, based on the uniformity of nature, you just say, well, how do you know everything in nature? And the knowledge that we do have is only small and infinitesimal. So there is a possibility that miracles can break in, and if that's the case, we need to investigate the historical information concerning Jesus. Alright, I'm going to have a sleep for 5 minutes and recuperate, and then I'm going to be back to do some more studies. I hope you found Gary Habermas of interest. I've linked to his site, and I hope that introduces you a little bit to him and his scholarship. He's a big scholar, and I've read nearly all of his material, and I've listened to most of his lectures and debates, so I hope you find him a blessing. Alright.